Cow de Varza by David No. Chapter 1. A Long Way from Paradise. Elise Rivera sat alone, her pale face illuminated by a data pad, its screen filled with denied requests and warnings. Her exasperated sighs and irritated screen taps were the only noises in the otherwise silent observation lounge. After a final rejection, she stretched out, yawned, and slid down the leather-covered bench. Her eyes drifted to the kaleidoscopic wall of vivid colors beyond the curved window. The colossal anomaly was known as the Void Cloud, and it still gave her a shiver of nervous excitement every time she saw it. Despite the distance, the Void Cloud provided a constant and constantly varying show for any willing to watch. She felt her eyelids growing heavy, but a wisp of perfume air stirred her from her reverie. The bench squeaked under her hands as she straightened. A low hum came from behind her, followed by footsteps. She watched a figure step up to the window and place his hand against it. He closed his eyes and breathed a sigh that clouded the surface. "Are you all right?" He spun around and stepped back. "Sorry, He took a deep breath and straightened out his lavishly decorated tunic. Her eyes lit up with recognition. "Arch-Commissioner Nevos?" "Only when I'm at the office." He approached, studying her face. "Here you can call me Gierre." "Elise." She made a greeting gesture with her hand, which he replicated. He then motioned towards the bench. "May I?" She smiled. "Aboard this station, you may do as you please." "Not exactly." He sat down but didn't relax. "Thank you." "Something on your mind?" "Always." He focused on the cloud, making it clear he wanted to change the subject. "Quite the view, eh?" "Certainly something to think about." "Oh?" Elise had been ready to make the long trek back to her suite and settle for a decent snooze. But upon Gierre Nevos' arrival, those aspirations had quickly vanished. It wasn't every cycle she got a chance to speak to the person elected to run Cow de Varza Station. "Yeah," Elise nodded. "It's been there for longer than we can tell, and yet we know nothing about it. What it is, what lies beyond, it's just there." She turned to look at him. "That's what I think about. What about you?" "I come here to clear my head, not fill it with more questions." He sighed. "I guess you could call it meditation. I don't often find people down here, though." "What is it you do for the station, Elise?" "Long-term visitor." Her shoulders slumped. "Although the board occasionally contracts me for systems work." Gierre raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You don't sound happy with that arrangement." Elise tried to hide her frown. "It keeps me fed. I only put tech support down because I had some experience. I really wanted to be a journalist." "A journalist?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you know, document the events of an ever-growing station, investigate stuff, chronicle life aboard, that sort of thing." "We have an office of public relations to keep the people informed." He spoke as though that was the end of the discussion. Elise wasn't satisfied. "The OPR doesn't report specifics or anything that might damage morale, but the people have a right to know what's going on." "I'm afraid I have to disagree. The Office of Public Relations does exactly what it should. As long as Cow de Varza exists, information will be distributed on a need-to-know basis. And while people are happy doing their jobs, they don't need to know." He made a sweeping motion with his hand. "It's all background noise anyway. Cleaning schedules, meeting times, delivery records. You're not missing much. Besides, what's wrong with the onboard social network? If there's anything worth knowing, the citizens know about it before we've made any statements. Information already spreads like an infection, whatever format you had in mind for such an endeavor. It would be too slow compared to the existing system." "It's hardly well reported, just rumors and speculations for the most part." "And the fiction is often more exciting than the eventual truth." He sat back and turned to look at her. "In reality, this station It is a boring place to work and live, besides the view. If the citizens want to make their own entertainment, that's fine by me. A little excitement to break up the monotony. I must say I rather enjoy listening to the whimsical theories people come up with. Elise couldn't hold his gaze. Instead, her eyes drifted back to the cloud. A large bloom of amethyst had erupted from deep within, drowning out the surrounding ambers and turquoises. If you like, Gierre continued, I can see if there's any more systems work for you. Bump you up the list a bit. Elise felt herself replying before thinking. Why? Well, you have to pay the bills somehow. She shot him a look. I can pay my way, with or without tech contracts. Gierre raised his hands. I didn't mean to cause offense. And I only suggested it because if you find yourself fulfilling work, you might prefer it over what you had planned. You seem like a, please excuse the term, useful person. Caldevarza needs people like you if it's going to keep functioning. I didn't come here to perform grunt work. If you don't mind me asking, why did you come here? Why does anyone come this far out? Looking for a new life, I guess. An escape. And what did you need an escape from, Elise? You ever hear of paradise? Gierre shook his head. I have not. Void region local, huh? All my life. How'd you end up running this place? Gierre grinned. A group on Winden Prime asked me to recruit a second wave of volunteers to boost the station's population. They told me I could stay if I wanted, and the volunteers seemed happy enough to have me around, requested a place on board. Fast forward half a gigasec, and the elections rolled around. Put my name forward, did a bit of campaigning. His smile widened. I talk about it like it was easy. Maybe compared to what I've dealt with since, but you already know how the story ends. The people elected me, and the board made it official. And that was that? And that was that, he replied, smirking. So, paradise. Elise nodded. It's a small mining settlement on Gierre. It's in the Yernto system. One of the last to hold out against businesses from our chaos. But when they finally gave in, things started getting better. We suddenly had better healthcare, better education programs, and better infrastructure was under construction too. Her head slumped. It was beautiful. We really took Paradise's aesthetic into consideration. What happened? Elise made a fist and hit the bench. The Free Paradise movement happened. Started causing trouble, bringing in people from the outside to disrupt our chaos's plans. Gierre spoke calmly. So you left? Not straight away. I thought the security forces would deal with the problem. Then, when they didn't, I considered signing on. Things just got worse. We needed more direct help from neighboring cities, but it never came. Last I heard, the movement had captured a ship convoy. Glad I left. Didn't want to get dragged into something like that. Gierre studied her expression, then sighed. You probably made the right decision. Came here looking for a fresh start, a way out. This is the furthest I could get from Paradise, so I booked it and took off. Haven't looked back since. Don't you have family? Friends? My family are a stubborn bunch, but they encouraged my decision. Do you stay in touch? Elise offered a knowing smile. When the connection is stable, I send messages. Sometimes, on a good cycle, I get one back too. Haven't heard anything in a while, but that's expected given the distance. Probably a message out there right now, flying its way across thousands of beacons just to get here. Would you ever go back? I don't know. Maybe for a visit. Paradise isn't the same place I remember growing up. I don't think it ever will be. Elise let the silence hang in the air. Eventually, Gierre found something to say. Have you been here long? Long enough to know the layout, not long enough to make friends. You strike me as the sort of person that chooses her associates carefully. Elise snorted, maybe a little too carefully. She offered the void cloud one final glance and got to her feet. It's been a pleasure, Gierre. I assure you, the pleasure has been all mine. Hope you work out whatever it is that's eating you up. Thanks. He nodded as she passed. Good sleep. As the door hissed shut, Arch Commissioner Gierre Nevos felt calmed by the silence, and finally allowed himself to relax. Any illusion of tranquility broke minutes later. He was roused from his thoughtless staring by a short, sharp cough. Once Gierre had gathered his senses and straightened up on the bench, he gave an irritated glance to the person standing beside him. You have news? Kaska Stone stood as straight as she could, despite her obvious tiredness. There was a darkness in her eyes that Gierre hadn't seen before. We still haven't received a response. And the scans? Scans show no visible damage, Stone replied. Their comm equipment should be functioning. It appears deliberate, sir. No course change? Only when we attempt to move the station. It sees what we've done, and it alters course to match. How long do we have? If they maintain current speed, half a megasec. And then what? I don't know. What? Gierre rocked forward. What do you think they're likely to do? If it really is just a ship with communication problems, then there won't be a problem. We will repair their equipment, remind them of the rules they should be observing, and send them on their way. The alternative? With respect, sir, I recommend you discuss this with Defense Commissioner Zeled. He would simply blast them out of existence. Consequences be damned. I want your opinion. If Kaudavarza can spare a vessel, we could intercept them and discover what the problem is. Gierre sat back and took a moment to assess his options. His only alternative means of defense were the station's all-or-nothing cannon. But if the incoming vessel really was experiencing communication problems, he'd be giving the order to wipe out hundreds, maybe even thousands of innocent people. Do we have any ships? Akonda and Vikpa are undergoing repairs. Mambaka and Cobra are on the Gatelin mission. I think Boa is ready. Gierre frowned. Boa is a transport ship. Yes, sir. Gierre closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. Akonda and Vipka, how close to ready are they? I would need to speak to the engineers. The bench creaked as Gierre stood. He took a deep breath and spoke with a firm voice. Specialist Stone, find me a ship, preferably one with weapons, that can intercept the vessel before it poses a threat to the station. Her head remained still, but her eyes searched the observation lounge. Me, sir? Will that be a problem? Her eyes narrowed. No, sir. Very well. Any questions? If the intercept mission meets with difficulty, what will our alternative solution be? Gierre exhaled and shook his head. That's what I'm going to see Commissioner Zealand about now. As Kaska Stone stepped out of the personal transport pod, she realized that the early risers probably wouldn't be too happy to see a specialist running around with concern practically oozing from every pore. The freshly cleaned floors reflected brighter than necessary lights, while the walls were lit up with panels displaying adverts or picturesque scenes of somewhere else in the system. She straightened out her uniform and tried to display confidence as she strode away from the pod. Oh, I told him I'd get it done. Why did I do that? She felt uncertainty trying to claw its way in. But Stone took a deep breath and continued her confident stride until she reached the elevator. As the otherwise empty pod rushed down the chute, lights whizzing by, Stone tried to push the tension from her aching bones. She'd been awake for 2 full cycles now, and although she did her best to hide it outwardly, she was feeling it internally. Taking a breather brought to the forefront all the sensations she'd been blocking out. Tension in her stomach, a dry ache in her throat, the foggy haze that clouded her mind. The smells from engineering bay reached her before the doors opened, forcing her back into the fake posture of someone who knew what they were doing. It was still early, but many of the engineers worked odd hours to accommodate the anytime visitors and fulfill the seemingly endless list of work orders. As she wandered between the huge bays, it occurred to her that there were many ships available, just none that fell under the station's control. She could ask Gierre to request a volunteer vessel, but that would show his trust was misplaced, and proving the Arch-Commissioner wrong rarely ended well. She also knew there was no guarantee anyone would step forward. She bit her lip, reminding herself that her failure could mean much worse than a demotion. It was close to bleeding as the officer door swung open ahead of her. "If you're here for a conda," a young, round-bellied man dropped down the step with a proud smile, "it's going to be another 3 MSECs. Sorry, Spesh." "What about Vipka?" "She's going to be even longer. We haven't even pried her open yet to see what the problem is." "The Arch-Commissioner needs a ship." "And I need a raise, more seconds in the cycle. Can't always get what we want." "What do you have?" "Nothing." He smiled. Stone realized he was enjoying this little game. "You can't provide the Arch-Commissioner a vessel, yet you expect a raise." She raised her hand as he drew breath to reply. "Unacceptable. What if the security of the station were at risk, or we needed to transport someone to a medical facility?" It's unacceptable," she repeated. "The station has 5 vessels for such jobs, yet you seem unable to keep them in service. You can't even keep the simplest of transit cores functioning properly. Have we promoted you above your ability? Is this too much for you to handle?" His face contorted angrily. "I'm the only person who can keep this shed running. Would you be willing to bet your job on that?" He exhaled. His shoulders slumped. "We've got 1 ship. Boa. I can have it ready by lights out." Stone maintained her cold stare. "Boa? That's it?" "It's that or nothing." "How long will it take you to equip a weapon?" His face scrunched again. "A weapon? What exactly are you planning?" "Ugh, I have to give him something." "If," she replied firmly, unsure of where the words were coming from, "the Arch-Commissioner should travel on this vessel and come under attack, it will be more than your job on the line." "Hey, you don't have to threaten me, you know." She stood up straight, reminding the engineer that she was in charge. "I need a ship. I need it armed, and I need it under 1/4 of an MSEC. Consider this your final warning. Failure to comply will result in my direct recommendation to the Arch-Commissioner that you not only be demoted, but arrested for negligence." He fixed her with an icy stare and wrung his hands. "We'll get it done." Stone spoke with a hiss, emphasizing each word. "See to it that you do." As she turned and started back towards the elevator, she was painfully aware that if he failed, he would be the least of Gierre's concerns. She positioned herself near the rear of the pod, away from the other workers. Her corner of solace gave her enough space to think. Shouldn't have got so angry. She exhaled. Too much stress. Not enough downtime. No sleep. Treating people like that, though. Ugh. I'll be lucky if he doesn't sabotage whatever ship he comes up with. And Boa? Boa? She shook her head. If the transport was all they had, it would have to do.